Succession is a big challenge that this industry is trying to solve, and it's not a secret. Everybody knows there's a big wave of succession opportunities and situations coming, and it's already in. I mean, it's already here, but it's going to continue for the next several years, even decades. It doesn't sound like it should be complicated, but it seems to have not been figured out at the high level. And I commend ICG because it sounds like you are creating that solution. Welcome to the Advisor Advocates Podcast. I am Garrett Lell, as always, and here today is with me is James Costabile of ICG Next. Welcome back, James. And as last time, you brought a guest with you. Stephen Kuczynski is one of your advisors, and he came along to share the story. It sounds like I've heard a lot of stories from advisors in the industry and ways they got to. I don't think anybody ever gets to where they are the way they plan to get there. This is like an industry of detours. But Stephen sounds like he has a particularly unique story that sort of led him to ICG. So excited to have you guys on and chat a little bit today.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Garrett. Good to be here. And yeah, I mean, Steve's got a really interesting story with us, a really good story. Starts out kind of funny, actually. So, I mean, as you know, as a firm, we've talked about this before. I mean, we think there's just, huge evolution in the industry in terms of needing young talent, right? To replace advisors that have had long, successful careers and are starting to think about what's next. Story actually started, we joke around here, he came on as actually an intern to one of our interns. So we were, I forget what year it was, Steve, but we were in the process of creating our office to be paperless, right? So we were going through that whole scanning and just kind of really getting all the old way done. And so we had an intern, a friend of the family, actually one of our sons of one of our clients. And we said to him, we need more manpower. We need more help. And so he brought Steve along one day. So we met him and he started helping us, doing that project. And from there, he actually became, part of the firm. We hired him. I think it was, right. Was it out of school, Steve? I kind of forget.
Yeah, so it was, I had one other job after graduating college. I was working at a bank in New York City, and I left that job a few months in, just realized it wasn't for me. And like James said, ended up here at ICG as we were kind of in between moving offices and going paperless, hanging TVs, moving desks around, doing it all. And then a few months in, I remember one of the people who was working here at the firm at the time was like, do you have a college degree? Like, do you want to work here? Or what are you thinking? I was like, yeah, well, I graduated college, 6 months ago or whatever it was at that time. I think this was August of 2015, if I remember correct. And from there, ended up doing an interview, I would call it, and getting hired. And the path from there is, I'm sure what we'll go through here today.
Yeah, and for us, Garrett, so over the years, right, we've refined this and we've developed this kind of I guess this kind of role. But one of the things that we believe is that when you're bringing young talent into the industry, you have to kind of bring them through multiple stages, right? We want them to learn the business from the ground up. We want them to see the service side of it, the advisory side of it, every piece of the puzzle. And so, at that point, we brought Steve on to what was a pretty newly developed program at that time. And we said, hey, you're going to come on board. You're going to start helping, behind the scenes on the service side, doing, a lot of the grunt work, as many would call it. If you would like, right, part of the program would be to get you licensed and trained and developed and mentored. And then from there, right, we can kind of see, where you fit in at the firm. And so for many years, Steve became instrumental in so much that went on behind the scenes on the service side. He went out and got a bunch of credentials and really, educated himself and started to work really heavily in our investment side. So started being really impactful with our wholesaling relationships, our trading relationships, our investment management relationships. And ultimately became an investment strategist for the firm and worked in that role for quite some time. And then, through many conversations that he had with myself and partners of the firm, started to come to kind of the realization, like, maybe this advisor role is something that I want to check out. And so from there, we kind of pivoted, and this is what I think is not unique to just our firm, but what I think is interesting about our firm is that we offer that, right? We don't want to peg young talent as to going into one direction or another. We want to let them, understand the firm, understand the industry, and then start to kind of identify what makes the most sense.
Yeah, it's interesting the way the industry has evolved over the last, call it 20 years or so, because that's approximately how long I've either been in it or at least been observing it. When I was in college, I wasn't in the industry, but I was a finance major and I was paying attention to the industry. And over that time, when I was in college, I remember the most uh, let me rephrase that. When I graduated college, one of the most frustrating realizations for me was when I realized that the financial services industry was not what I thought it was when I was in college and what I was studying for. I wanted to be a financial advisor, but I didn't know what a financial advisor really was. I say that all the time. And at that time, you really only had one role if you were an advisor, and that was sales. Your job was client acquisition, go out, find clients, sign them up, that kind of thing. And then you had back office support that was, an admin or an administrator, or I don't even know if paraplanners were really a big thing at that time. It was really just you had brokers and you had support staff. Over time, and it's been a long evolution to get here, but now when you say you're a financial advisor, that doesn't necessarily tell the person you're talking to exactly what your job is. Some advisors focus on planning, some advisors specialize in investments, some advisors specialize in taxes, some in estates. There's a lot of different things that even an advisor can be. And then also there's a lot of crossover that's starting to be created. There's more specialization, I guess. You've got people that come in a marketing role and then they eventually decide to become an advisor. You have people who are investors or traders or portfolio managers that end up migrating to that side. And as you guys were just sitting there talking, I just thought about it. After somebody has come, when I come in at 23 years old, I didn't know anything about what I was doing, and now I've got to go out and convince a 45-year-old that they can trust me with their $500,000. And frankly, I mean, I'm going home and not thinking that I wouldn't trust me with that, but I hope they do. You know what I mean? But when you offer different paths of entry, or when you offer different entry points, I guess I should say, you allow people to come in and start their career doing one area in one role that is adding value to the firm. It could be marketing, it could be administrative, it can be trading, and then as their knowledge grows in the industry, if I can see where, and I don't know, Stephen, if this is your experience or not, but after you've done it for a while, you have the confidence to say, hey, I could sit in front of a client and talk to them about this and feel confident and competent in being able to help them. I'd like to give that a shot. And I could see that leading to a much more confident and successful sales force when they've spend some time with the training wheels before they get out there and start riding the bike.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that's a perfect segue probably for me to share, kind of the whole journey that got me, to the position I'm in today. So, like I touched on, came into the firm as James joked about, intern to the intern. The first couple months were, just anything and everything, not really even investment related or, advisor role related or, anything like that. Like I said, it was, getting the desks ready in the office, getting us ready to move offices, going paperless with all of our documents. And then once I took on, I guess, that actual role and got officially hired, so to speak, shortly after, I began studying for my licensing. I got my Series 7, my 66, my health and life and all that. While that was all happening and I was studying and, getting ready for all of that, when I look back at it, the way I think about it is, it's kind of just a utility guy. The way that I've described it is I was playing, offense, defense, and special teams. It was really just kind of whatever was needed from whoever at the firm. I was there to either know how to do it and get it done or figure it out. And I think also, able to create some new processes that I think we still work with here in our firm today. And as that kind of advanced, I think the advantage that gave me and, still helps me today is that I got to see things from all different perspectives. I was helping advisors with client situations, deliverables for them, meeting prep, etc. Also doing stuff on the back end, on the service end of things. So learning that piece of it, and all along I was getting to, sit by, shadow, have mentorship meetings weekly, things that still resonate and come up in my mind when I'm on client meetings, today. And then after I got licensed and, was able to move into a trading role, and had the ability to do some other things, it kind of worked out perfectly that we had someone at the firm working in an investment strategist role that was kind of moving on to do other things. I stepped into that role. It was like drinking out of a fire hose at first. But I think, pretty quickly caught on, started to educate myself, and, be able to do my job better and better as time went on. That continued for a few years. I went out and pursued some credentials and, studied some more and tried to learn more about the industry, all while continuing to, soak in information and experience and everything from, the people who were at the firm, like James and the other partners, which, super valuable. Can't really even put a price on that. And, as that continued to progress, I think my role and my involvement with the investment side of things for everyone at the firm grew, which I think, proved to me and proved to myself, the value I could provide, and I think provided value to the firm. And, just kind of continued to be a sponge and soak in everything. I was still doing service work, doing investment work, and, still absorbing a lot from, watching and partaking in what the advisors were doing. And slowly, I think that progressed over time. Advisors would have me, call a client to execute a trade or do something like that. And that was kind of my first exposure to, not just being on the back end and making client contact and being on the front lines that way. And, after a few more years of that, I was given an opportunity with an acquisition that we made right around the time that the pandemic had hit. So the first time that I, sat across a client on my own was, amidst the craziness of the pandemic. So you could imagine, to your point that you made before, Garrett, when you're sitting there at a young age, saying, why are these 45, 50, 60-year-old people gonna, care what I say or trust what I say? It was a unique opportunity, in a time of tumultuousness. You saw the pandemic coming, markets were acting a little funky, so to speak. And, that was kind of
That's an understatement.
yeah, my first foray into that. So it was kind of trial by fire. But I remember, being out there for my first meeting, to go meet 2 or 3 clients in a given day, and being super nervous. What am I going to do? This is my first time doing it, alone, sitting across from a table from you know, a retired couple. What are they going to think of what I say? How am I going to say it? And by the third meeting of that day, I was like, I'm equipped to do this. I either have the information, I've soaked it in, I have the experience, I've seen these things, I've worked on it on the back end. Just have to speak with conviction and believe in what I'm saying, and tell the clients what I know, and also be open about what I don't know and I can figure out for them.
Yeah, James, you probably know this about me, but I have this knack for turning everything into a football analogy somehow or another. Football analogy or golf analogy, one or the other. It just seems like all roads lead back to one of those two things eventually. I think about prior to, and I'm not sure exactly when this changed in the NFL for the NFL fans out there, but for the longest time, rookie quarterbacks didn't start. You drafted somebody and maybe even in the first round, but they didn't start right away. Peyton Manning was an anomaly in that he actually started, I think, his first year. But usually, even the number one picks, they would sit them for a few games at the beginning of the year and then maybe get them into it. But then you look back at some really successful quarterbacks that you've seen. Steve Young was behind Joe Montana for several years before he took the reins. Aaron Rodgers sat behind Brett Favre for a long time before he took the reins. Even recently in Green Bay, another Green Bay story, Jordan Love sat behind Aaron Rodgers for a couple of years before Aaron Rodgers left and he took the reins. And when you look at the success rate of those, it doesn't necessarily mean that every single one who takes that path is successful. And there have been guys that started on day one that did eventually have success. But I think if you objectively look at it, I think it's a fair thing to say that the quarterbacks who started on day one have a much lower success rate than those who sat and learned for a couple of years behind a seasoned veteran. And I think it's funny that the industry just now seems to be maybe picking up on that in the last few years, because the idea before was go out and draft. I mean, this was 20, 25 years ago, but the old school mentality of this was go out and get 87 quarterbacks and let them compete with each other, and surely one or two of them will be good. And that's what we'll end up going with. And now the industry does seem to be taking a little bit more time in some firms, in some cultures, to groom that talent a little bit so that you can step in with success early on.
I mean, listen, I think it's a spot on analogy, right? If I think back to, when some of us who've been around for a while, 20, 25 years, we got, into the industry, feet to the fire, really, right? You're not only out there, working to get client relationships, but you're learning and you're growing and you're getting credentials and you're getting licenses. And, I talk to our team about this from time to time. I don't know that it's any better or worse today, but it's different, right? Today, I think, in my opinion, the path towards success or the highest likelihood towards success to us as tenured advisors and tenured firms grooming the next generation is to bring them in first and foremost. And I say this to a lot of our interns because we've got a pretty, robust internship program. It's like, listen, when you come to work here for the summer, the idea is to figure out if this is what you want to do or if it's not what you want to do. Because at the end of the day, we want you to get on to what's best for you. And I think some interns have come through this program and they've recognized that this is not the part of finance that they want to be in. And I think that's a good thing for us and a good thing for them to identify it early. With our younger, talent that starts to recognize, no, this is the area that I like, right? I don't necessarily want to be on a trading floor. I don't want to be in the private equity, wherever other areas of finance, though this is where I want to be. I then think it's incumbent upon us as a firm to say, all right, how are we going to give you the highest likelihood towards success? And what I share with a lot of our advisors who are, newer to the industry, is that, what you see us doing every day, that's it, right? So to Steve's point, when he actually got in front of clients at that point throughout put the pandemic aside for a second, right? And just think about what he was actually doing at that time. It's like, you've seen it, you've done it, you've been involved in it. And so there's nothing about your readiness that you should be concerned about. And again, that is a dual edge, right? We both have to be ready for that. The firm has to be comfortable that the advisor is ready to go out and do that, and the advisor has to be comfortable that they're ready to go do that. And Steve was, very, very, at that time, it was very clear that not only is this what he wanted for his career, but that he was ready for it. And, he talks about things when we first brought him on, or, about moving TVs and offices and stuff like that. You know what that demonstrated to us when I think back at it now is that he was ready to work and he was ready to support the firm in any way the firm needed him at any time. And when I think about the most successful advisors that I've seen over the years, they come to the table and saying, I'm ready to support our clients wherever they need me at any point on any topic. I'll go out and be a utility for that family. And I think that is another way that the industry has changed nowadays, is that advisors really are, that fabric of support, for their clients, much more than maybe we were looked at, 20 years ago. People come into the office and, okay, what investments can you help me with? Right. That was kind of the mindset. Today, I think it's more about how can an advisor marry, the personal, the professional, and the financial, for their clients.
Well, and the interesting thing about evolution and growth is that it evolves and grows as well, right? And what that looks like evolves and grows with someone's career. Stephen, I know that when you came in, you had kind of a unique way to get in there, and there was some evolution in your own career to get you to the table as an advisor. But what I understand, that's continued as you've grown as an advisor, and now the support that you're getting from ICG and the paths that you're starting to take around acquisitions and being a part of other the ways that you're able to add value to the firm have continued to grow and evolve with you. And it hasn't just they didn't just give you the tools to become a good advisor so you can get your own clients. Now that you have your own book, there are also ways for you to continue to evolve and grow within that ecosystem.
Yeah, 100%. So kind of picking up the story where we left off. So, sat across from my first clients as part of an acquisition that the firm made, which was, a great opportunity. And that was kind of getting my feet wet, getting into this side of the business. But at that time I was, taking on those clients of the firm, working with them, beginning to build that side of, my skill set and, what I was looking to do moving forward, and still working, in my role as the investment strategist for the firm. So I was, kind of a hybrid at that point. At that same time, that gave me the realization that, I could probably try to bring in some clients of my own as well, right? In addition to servicing, what the firm had acquired and, doing my job, at the time. And I think what I realized is, that was more difficult than I had ever imagined. My experience up until then was, being around very successful advisors in this business, which is what was very valuable for me to, soak in information and get experience and, become better equipped. And, I never really saw anyone start from the ground up at that point. So, I kind of had three buckets of, career going in a sense of, servicing firm clients. That was a great opportunity for myself, trying to build my own book of business, from the ground up with, all the help and the skill set development that I had up until that point, and still, working in my role, on the investment side for the firm. So as that developed over time, eventually it came to an inflection point of, you know, in my own mind, what do I really want to do, and what do I want to get out of this industry, and where do I want my life to go? That's when I first had that thought of, well, I want to get out of my role on the investment side. I'm doing a good job servicing these clients that the firm gave me the opportunity with. I'm building my book, slowly but surely it felt. And that ultimately evolved into, myself stepping away from my investment strategist role, kind of sunk up with, at the same time, the firm giving me more opportunities on, that side of firm owned clients, giving me more opportunities to get more reps, get more times in the batter's box, taking swings. And every one of those was just really increasing confidence. So my role kind of evolved and changed over time, as you alluded to. And eventually, that panned out into me taking the full dive onto that side of the business. I pursued some more education at the time, going after my CFP and a couple of other credentials. And it really just all came together at the right time, it seemed.
I mean, Garrett, one of the reasons that I thought Steve would be a great, addition to our conversation today is because I actually think he demonstrates, an interesting life cycle of today's advisor, right? So, college degree, finance background, working at a bank in the city that for whatever reason, didn't think it was for him, got associated with a firm like ours, realized that this advisory space was something that he thought that he would like, wasn't quite sure where he fit in. And as a firm, right, we gave him the opportunity to not only grow his credentials, grow his licenses, but grow his experience and confidence. And I think ultimately, what it turned out to be is, and again, this is, I don't want to say it's by design, because some of what we've done over the past 15 years has just been like, oh, that's a good idea. Let's kind of do more of that. Right. But I think as a firm, what we realized is that it's our job to make sure that as these, successful, tenured, soon to be retiring advisors are looking at what's next, someone needs to be able to plug in the successor. And that successor has to have certain credentials. They have to have a certain grit about them. They have to have a certain resourcefulness about them. And so the only way to figure that out is to have them, on the field for a while, right? And then determine who's eligible. And so we've had a degree of success, and it's still in process actually, but we've had a degree of success with identifying those advisors that want succession, right? And want to get a good multiple for their life's work and want to make sure that their clients are in good hands, and then giving them an option of saying, hey, we've developed kind of this stable, if you will, of early and mid-career advisors. And here's kind of what they look like, right? Here's how long they've been around. Here's the credentials they've have. Here's what we've seen from them in terms of building their own book. And then boom, we pair them together. And what it's created is a scenario by, first and foremost, those clients that are losing their lifetime trusted advisor, right? They're the ones we care the most about. They're really, really happy because their advisor has gone out and vetted the firm and vetted the next generation of advisor who's going to be working with them and said, this is your guy or gal. So the clients feel really good. The advisor who's leaving feels really good because their clients are happy. They're monetizing their life's work, and they feel comfortable with that. And then, of course, the next generation of advisors is getting an opportunity to essentially foster this really, really valuable set of relationships and valuable business, on behalf of the firm. So, like I said, vision has worked out really well. We're in the process of putting this all together, and we've got a couple of nice pieces already in the books. But when we look forward, I think that's a big part of the future of the industry is the pairing of these early and mid-career advisors with these tenured advisors. And I think our role as a firm is to kind of help facilitate that.
Yeah, it's funny too because succession is a big challenge that this industry is trying to solve, and it's not a secret. Everybody knows that success. There's a big wave of succession opportunities and situations coming, and it's already in. I mean, it's already here, but it's going to continue for the next several years, even decades, and it's still a problem, and it's one that we run into a lot. And I say it's a problem maybe maybe I see it more than the advisors and firms do, but you end up with these situations where somebody's 65, 70 years old, they have a $100 million book of business, $200 million book of business, it's worth 5, 6 million bucks, and they want to bring someone in. They don't want to sell to someone bigger than them because if they do that, they're going to lose control. They want to bring someone in under them who will do it their way and continue to do it their way and groom them for that. The problem is, I don't know a whole lot of 35, 40-year-olds that have 6 million sitting around, right? I mean, and you run into this situation where I was actually talking to somebody about this the other day that they want to maximize the value of their business and they should. They also want to do what's best for their client and they should. They also want to handpick their successor, which they should. But when you start adding all these things up, it starts to look like a Rubik's Cube, and you can't figure out every time you solve for one side, you solve for another. And it's like, okay, we've got this solution now that's going to get you the multiple that you want for your book of business, but not on your terms. You're not going to be able to pick your successor, or your successor is going to be somebody who may or may not be, they may not be they're not buying the book of business. They may be still allowed to work as a service advisor on that, but they don't own it. Or, okay, we've got this solution where your legacy is going to be intact and everything's going to stay the same for your clients, but you're going to be getting 2x on your book instead of 4. So it's just an interesting thing that it doesn't sound like it should be complicated, but it seems to have not been figured out at the high level. And I commend ICG because it sounds like you are creating that solution.
I would say it's you're right. It still is a Rubik's Cube to a degree, right? And I think part of the reason that, and I think a lot of firms say this, but part of the reason our growth has been very deliberate and very pointed and to a degree muted, right? I think there's a lot of opportunities that we pass up in different regions of the country or what have you, is because again, in creating that perfect, in solving for that Rubik's Cube, you're right? So what we've tried to look at is, okay, what deals or what opportunities can we put together where everyone is getting what they want? And it's very few and far between. You've got to really thread the needle, but we've been able to do that successfully in the few deals that we've put together, where I think everyone feels treated fairly. I think everybody has an opportunity to do what it is that they intend to do. But you're right. I mean, in my very, very small experience, the problem that a lot of retiring advisors have, or those looking for succession, is whoever their junior is, or whoever they thought might be their successor. The problem is they may not possess all of the qualities that they need. They can have a great client relationship, but they can't run the business. They can run the business, but they're not great with financial planning, right? So I think when a firm like ours steps in that is trying to kind of put the pieces together, we offer that kind of cohesiveness that the advisor and the client are looking for. And I think you're going to see more of that. We're not the only ones doing it. There's a lot of other folks out there doing it, but there's also some folks doing it in different ways, right? Trying to aggregate everybody together, then trying to figure out who the successor is going to be. I'm not sure clients want that, right? I don't know that that's what clients want. I don't think clients want us as advisors, selling to big firms and then figuring out who the successor is going to be, and the advisor not really having a role in that. So all of our, the opportunities that we look for is where we can get very, very intimate with the advisor, literally go through the list of clients and say, okay, what personality type are we looking for the majority of the clients? What's the geography of the book? I mean, really getting that granular before we would ever, kind of put ourselves out there.
Awesome stuff. Well, thank you both for your time. Really enjoy the conversation. If you are an advisor who is either side of that coin, if you're looking to sell your practice or you're getting to that stage of your career where you're thinking about succession, if you haven't found the right fit, ICG is definitely worth your consideration. I think they really have built an excellent system there. Or if you're someone closer to Stephen and I's age and you're looking for opportunities to grow your career and have a little more flexibility, again, ICG, great people over there. I've enjoyed getting to know you guys and have you on the show. It's always just such a pleasure. If you are an advisor, you can reach out to me if you want to have a confidential conversation. Maybe not let James know about it right away. You just want to have a little conversation between the two of us. You can give me a call, go to my website, find all my contact information, or send me an email, Garrett@theadvisoradvocates.com. Or if you don't need to talk to me and you know that James is someone you want to chat with and ICG is something worth exploring, James, what are some ways they can reach out to you or your team directly to get some time on your calendar?
Yeah, so ICGnext.com. They can always visit the website. My contact information is on there. Always welcome to shoot me an email or give me a call. I'll be happy to chat and see where we might be able to help.
Stephen, thank you so much for joining us, man. It was a pleasure to meet you, and it was awesome to hear your story and your background. Really intriguing, so it was a pleasure to get to hear it.
Yeah, Garrett, thanks for having me, and great chatting with you here today.
Awesome, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon. See you.